for me, that if we are producing food in such a way that causes angst and pain for what becomes our food, you pay for that. There's backlash to that because it just isn't right. So the short answer is yes and no. Moving the animals in pastures allows the manure to be spread. So we have the cattle come through and they mow the lawn about a month before the chickens come on, and they leave their cow patties. And then the chickens come over and they scatter them and they add their very high nitrogen poop to the mix. And then about, depends on the rain, 3 to 6 weeks later, or when it finally gets water, the nitrogen causes what's called a nitrogen bloom, where a whole lot of grass comes up in that area and we bring the cattle back through to knock it back down. So the pathogens that are natural to each one of those species gets kind of wiped out and neutralized by the other species. That's a sustainable practice. That's one focused on sustainability. It also happens to be quite humane because it gives them nice lives out on pasture. And that is different from the issue of organic, because some people who follow non-organic practices still would call themselves sustainable.
Could you redefine the difference?
The difference between sustainable and organic is that you can be sustainable according to those folks' beliefs and not follow the USDA or any other organic guidelines. So if you're rotating pastures, if you are managing animal waste, if you are utilizing waste, it's called the Gaia cycle as well, so that waste becomes fertilizer that either stays on the ground or is composted to create rich earths that then enhance other parts of the land, like where you might do market gardening, then that's sustainable. And when you don't have gases from manures escaping into the air, when you're using seed that doesn't become sterile, there's a lot of sustainability practices. But Joel Salatin calls himself sustainable, and he also calls himself beyond organic. But he has also said, if I have to choose between buying feed corn from my neighbor with a little bit of atrazine, which is a really toxic chemical, then he would choose that rather than trucking it in, because that's the carbon footprint part. You try to operate as locally as possible, supporting local economy, but also minimizing the use of fossil fuels and moving things around. But in my mind, when you use petrochemicals that kill all the plants, not just the weeds, or all of the microbiology and not just the pests, in the case of pesticides, I don't believe that's sustainable. So you might be moving animals around and stuff, but we have to get to a place where we stop using GMO seeds, genetically modified seeds that can't be reproduced, and when we stop using petrochemicals and toxins that actually have a net effect of negatively impacting the soils. So Salatin's lobby is that the pasture is just so good and rich that the animals are somehow not affected. And I don't want to misquote him, but I've actually heard that in a couple of his online, I think YouTube possibly may carry those movies of speeches that he's given. I happen to disagree with that. And he also raises Cornish crosses. And I disagree strongly with that. We shouldn't be producing animals that cannot exist in any way, shape, or form naturally.
When you're talking about all this and how to farm sustainably, what is it that farmers have to face with pesticides being so pushed and volume of food and what you produce being such a big issue? How can farmers switch or become sustainable?
Good question. One of the big issues around transitioning is you can't sell your food as organic, and if it's grains that become feed, organic feed mills can't buy it, and we can't use it if we're certified organic. But the big issue is where does the money go that supports farmers, period? Because right now, the Farm Bill, the money that is available from our government to support farmers only supports industrial agriculture. The huge tracts of Monsanto GMO corn and soy fields, GMO cotton, land that doesn't produce if you don't feed it with petrochemical fertilizers, and then they're dead because the herbicides and pesticides, there's no insect or bird life. It's kind of an eerie silence over those big, huge fields. Those farmers, it is, you live in Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
So,
there's no bird songs at all.
No, it's really sad. Those farmers are supported to grow that way, and they're also supported to grow nothing at all. They are not supported financially, and there is no support in the farm bills to carry a farmer who's not growing anything to transfer his fields over to be able to produce and be certified organic. That's at least a 3-year process, and it may be longer depending on what you've used on your fields. And also you have to have a buffer against what other farmers may be growing.
We've been draining down our freshwater resources, all across the planet at an absolutely unsustainable rate.
They say in Iowa that a half of the topsoil is gone since it's been settled, and that same topsoil has taken a millennia to be built up.
People don't like to admit this, but it's cheaper to extract and exploit than it is to renew and regenerate.
If we turned all of our farmland in this country to organic and regenerative methodologies where we're putting basically cover crops or compost back into the soil and not using chemical fertilizers, we could mitigate 25% of our emissions in this country alone.
It's really important for us as citizens to understand the real cost of food, the environmental cost of the food, the production cost of the food, what the cost of the food is if all workers were in just and safe environments and all animals in humane conditions.
What's at stake is this silk cloth of the organic dairy industry.
They don't want what you grow, even if the people want to eat it. They only want what they want to market.
I've almost lost this farm very close. I've almost lost it twice in the last 20 years.
We all eat every day, and we all buy food, and every purchase that any of us makes should be a purchase for what you're trying to see the world look like, not only for the value of what you're buying at that moment in time.
What kind of rise in sales in your business and the demand for what you're doing have you noticed, I would say, in the last 10 to 15 years? Or has it just been a much more recent phenomenon? Or is it quite different than that, and you're actually experiencing a drop in sales?
No, we're not. We've only been farming for 3 years, or this is our 3rd year. So as a farmer and as a community of farmers, we're part of an organic farmer organization, statewide organization. So I get a chance to talk to other farmers. And one of the things that will be raised is the idea of competition. And the fact is, the market hasn't begun to be saturated because we are not able to produce the quantity of food that's being demanded. And when movies like Food Inc. are put out and people see that, the demand only goes up. I get probably somewhere between 4 and 10 emails a week from people who have found us on localharvest.com or eatwild.com or through the Farmers Market Network, or just because they Googled pastured chicken or organic farm Austin, Texas, or something like that, because they are looking for another way to get their food. So the demand is increasing. Production is actually the issue because it takes time. It's very labor and cost intensive to produce truly sustainable food, especially if you incorporate humane treatment into that equation.